Mr. President, I want to talk about the extension of unemployment benefits and in the larger context of our national debt. Allow me the opportunity to throw out just a few numbers, which I then will explain in just a few minutes. $30 billion, $200 billion, $13 trillion, $114,000, and 60% of GDP. To many Americans, these numbers are just that, numbers with no real meaning to them. Unfortunately, the same can be said for many here in the Senate as well. These are just simple numbers without consequence. But nothing could be further from the truth. These 5 numbers are markers along the road to fiscal catastrophe that we are heading down at full speed. These 5 numbers together are symbols of a great threat to the stability of our country, both today and in the future. So the $30 billion number. 14% of Nevadans are unemployed at this point. People are hurting across my state. We lead the country in unemployment. Well, a lot has been said on the issue of extending unemployment benefits. And while this issue has become one of political fodder and partisanship, the facts on this issue have been left out in favor of high-strung rhetoric and political opportunity. Let me take a moment to explain to my constituents the real debate on this issue. I, along with my Republican colleagues, believe that extending these benefits for the unemployed should be a top priority here in the Senate. I think both sides of the aisle agree on that. And I know that we can pay to extend these benefits now by cutting spending in other areas and redirecting some stimulus funds which have had little impact on the economy in my state and across the country. Despite what some of my other colleagues may say here on the floor, there is no debate on extending the benefits for those who have fallen victim to a downturn economy. The debate on this issue actually lies with the fact that those on the other side of the aisle would like to take the easy way out. And they would like to avoid paying for this important legislation because it's tough to make cuts. Instead, we're going to add another $30 billion onto our record-breaking national debt. I know that $30 billion is just another number to those on the other side of the aisle, but it's one that could easily be paid for now by just adhering to their own policy of pay-go. Each time that the Senate has proceeded to vote on extending unemployment benefits, members in this body have had 2 options. One, the Democrat option of extending these benefits and just putting the debt, adding to the debt onto our children and our grandchildren. They've had on the other side, they've had the Republican option of not only extending these vital unemployment benefits, but also paying for it at the same time by reducing spending in other areas. The other side of the aisle has voted against these common sense proposals each time, 6 times to be exact. Let me make that more clear. Democrats have voted against paying for unemployment extension 6 times. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time that those on the other side of the aisle have gone against their own pay-go policy, but it is the first time that they have hurt thousands of Americans in doing so. I mentioned the number of $200 billion earlier. This is the number that represents the amount of spending that has violated the Democrats' own pay-as-you-go policy. 4 months ago, there was a signing ceremony down at the Rose Garden with the President. Democrats decided to heed the warnings of many here, including myself, who said that we were literally bankrupting the future of our country with the amount of national debt that we were passing down to our children and our grandchildren. So they came up with a policy that would mandate paying spending proposals now rather than later. However, there were a few caveats to this new fiscal responsibility proposal, one of which allowed for emergency funding to be exempt. What we have witnessed in the last 4 months has truly been a genius way of skirting this pay-as-you-go policy. They have deemed a grotesque amount of domestic spending as, quote, emergency spending. when in fact it is not an emergency. They have done this most recently with unemployment benefits. It is hard to argue that funding that we knew would expire to be an emergency, but they have tried to do so anyway. The real sticking point here is that if we are to deem every spending measure that comes to the floor of this body as an emergency, then we are only speeding up our path to fiscal ruin, ensuring that our record-breaking national debt continues to be just that, record-breaking. $13 trillion. That is our national debt today that we reached. It's a new milestone. But it's not one that I think that many are celebrating. Our national debt broke into a new stratosphere when it crossed the $13 trillion threshold. It's truly an astounding number. But this gets worse, much worse over the next 10 years under the President's own budget. The debt that will be added over the next, by 2019, will be 3 times the amount that was rung up over the first 232 years of this country's history. So take all of the presidents before President Obama, all the way through George W. Bush, add the total number of debt that they have added to this country, and we're going to triple that in the 10 years from 2009 to 2019. Just like an average family, when they delay payment on a purchase and charge it to their credit card, they are borrowing money from the bank with interest added on to the amount that they need to pay back. The United States, when borrowing money and charging it on its national credit card, is in the same situation. However, our country isn't borrowing the money from a bank. We are borrowing it from China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and many other countries around the world. Each time the majority deems the spending bill as an emergency funding bill, we delay paying the cost for this legislation. We are adding on to this national credit card bill with interest that we pay to China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and many others. At any point, these countries could decide to up our interest rates to such a level when we attempt to start paying down our debt, we are only able to pay off the interest that we owe on our credit card, not the actual debt. Further, should our economic situation continue to decline, these countries could revoke our borrowing privileges altogether. If that happens, this would be catastrophic for the economy of the United States. I mentioned $114,000 earlier. When President Obama first took office, a child born in the United States was born with $85,000 of debt on its back in just a very short period of time. That child born in the United States today now has $114,000 of debt on their back. And that amount is just going to continue to rise because of how fast we're adding to the national debt. Going even farther into the future, should President Obama receive a second term and our spending levels stay at a high level than they are now, a child born in the United States will owe almost $200,000. As they're born, that's how much debt they have, $200,000 for every child born in the United States. Well, I've spoken a lot over this past year about the future of our country and what this debt burden will actually mean. A new child owing that much money, this means that they won't be able to pay for college, buy a house, start a small business, raise a family, and maybe retire someday. So this isn't just an abstract number. We actually owe these countries the money that we have borrowed from them with interest. We have to pay that money back, whether these countries demand payment 5 years from now or later. We still have to pay it back. I mentioned 60%, that number. 60% of GDP. Let me remind you of the of this final number, what it really means. It's a critical milestone on the path to fiscal ruin. Most of us remember the images that we saw in the nightly news of the riots breaking out across the country in Greece when it was revealed that the government was beyond bankrupt and no longer able to guarantee services throughout their country. Historically, our federal debt has been around 35% of GDP. Since the Democrats have taken control of Congress, this debt has skyrocketed. The tipping point is what Greece found when they had so much debt on their books that people realized they were going to be unable to pay it back. The tipping point where the world community realized that they should be charging a lot more to lend Greece money was when Greece exceeded 60% of GDP. The United States passed that magic number this year. 60% was the tipping point for Greece. How far behind them do you think we really are? The United States passed that 60% part of GDP this year with the help of the health care bill, the $200 billion that should have been offset with PAYGO, the stimulus bill that was $850 billion last year that just added on to the debt, last year's appropriations bills, which had large increases in each one of them. The country of Greece is foreshadowing the possible fate for the United States if we don't take responsibility for the fiscal mess that we have created. We have lived this year through instant gratification policies, and not only is the future of our country in jeopardy, so are the next 10, the next 5, and this year. So, Mr. President, $30 billion represents the amount of money Democrats want to add to our national debt to extend unemployment benefits. $200 billion represents the amount of money that has been deemed as emergency to get around the PAYGO rules. $13 trillion represents the record-breaking national debt that we have reached just this year. That $114,000 that I mentioned is the amount that each child born today in the United States has debt on their backs. 60% of GDP is the tipping point of economic collapse that puts the United States one step closer to Greece. To many in this body, these are just numbers. I think we all have to face the reality that these numbers represent markers on the path to fiscal ruin if we don't turn it around. We are heading dangerously close to fiscal catastrophe, and our country literally stands at a crossroads. We have to draw the line in the sand and stop borrowing money for legislation when the option to pay for it stands only one vote away. Extending unemployment benefits isn't a partisan issue, and neither is our country's impending fiscal crisis. The Senate needs to extend these benefits by paying for them now, and then we can take the first step in the country in the right direction toward fiscal responsibility and economic recovery. Mr. President, just a couple of other comments. Why are we not reducing unnecessary and wasteful government spending to pay for example, these unemployment extension benefits? Senator Coburn's office has identified almost $4.5 billion in savings over 10 years from reducing unnecessary printing and publishing costs of government documents. Add up the savings from these cuts, and these kind of examples are the type of wasteful spending that we could pay for unemployment extension just at least for a short time. Well, how about redirecting some of the unused stimulus funds? The stimulus bill was supposed to be an immediate stimulus. Some of the money has still not been paid out or obligated. So how about instead of just adding to the debt, we take that money and pay for and offset the spending for the unemployment benefits? I don't understand the absolute refusal by the other side to extend unemployment benefits in a fiscally responsible way. For example, the small business lending bill, which the Senate is currently set to consider, contains a number of offsets for improving tax collections and changing the tax rules on retirement accounts. The so-called Medicare Doc Fix was recently signed into law by the President. This was completely offset by changes in Medicare billing and anti-fraud provisions and changes in pension rules. Now, I don't necessarily agree with some of the offsets that the other side of the aisle has used, but the point is that the debate on the Senate floor regarding paying for any piece of legislation should not rest with whether we pay for new legislation, but it is how we should pay for it. This debate is a debate that we owe to the American people, our future generations, and the continued prosperity of our great nation. Tomorrow, or maybe later today, we will be voting on a bill that will extend unemployment insurance benefits. The other side of the aisle will have one that extends those unemployment benefits, but it will just be adding to the national debt. The Republican side will be offering an alternative. It will be completely offset. I hope that this chamber finally gets its fiscal house in order, extends those really important unemployment benefits that need to be given to folks who are really struggling out in America. But let's do it in a fiscally responsible way. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Virginia.